Wait, I want to
Okay,
wait.
you want to wait. Well, let's go ahead and start with Fairy Queen then. Let's start left to right. We'll start with Fairy Queen. Your opening statement, please.
Sure. I'm going to keep it very brief because I'd like to quickly get to the opening. So my thesis tonight is one, I think that Christians should promote women's rights. I think the question is the question of what rights we promote and what rights we don't promote. I think that depends on your conception of one, what is a right? Why do people deserve to have rights? And ultimately, the Venn diagram that occurs between the rights that are allotted to secular people, the rights that Christians believe that Christians should have. And I think that there is a significant amount of overlap between these two different positions. And where that overlap lies, I think that Christians should promote women's rights insofar as it aligns and coheres with their principles. I don't think that you can have duties without the rights that enable you to perform them. I suspect that we're going to get into a big conversation about what are rights. But I don't want to only talk about that. So I'll finish with that, and then I'll finish with a series of questions of some terms I think that we really need to hash out. One, what is a Christian? What does that mean? And I understand that that everyone here comes from a different religious background. I understand some people here are devoutly faithful. I understand that, but it's simply the case that Christian is an umbrella term, and there are lots of different denominations that fall underneath this umbrella. And the difficulty, even for Christians to decide which rights to promote and what rights not to promote, is going to depend on what denomination that you fall into. So, what does it mean to be a Christian? What are rights? I suspect we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. I don't want to get too wrapped up into the essence of the question. Are we talking about legal rights or natural rights? Do women's rights differ from men's rights? And if so, how or should they? And finally, and I think this goes back to the beginning of the statement, which is, should Christians promote women's rights? Okay, promote. Does that mean legal advocacy? Does that mean debate, cultural advocacy? What does that actually mean? What does that actually look like? And I will leave it there.
Wonderful. Fatty, to you.
Good evening or good morning for me. I'm just glad to be here between savvy debaters. I just think Christians should do it because that's what Christ would want them to do it. I think if Christ was alive and well in 2024, he would preach for Christians to actually fight for or advocate for women's rights. So that's my opening statement. Yes, they should.
Simple and to the point. Torsia, to you.
So they kind of already do promote rights, but I don't think they should promote them anymore. I'm just going to keep it at that.
Simple and easy. And Andrew, last but not least.
Yeah, so let's dive into a few things. I think it's really nice that Fairy Queen says, well, I don't really want to get bogged down on A, B, C. Well, who gives a shit what you want to get bogged down on, right? Semantics are important in an argument. It's irrelevant to me what you want to get bogged down or not get bogged down on. I think that these are important questions that you bring up, right? But you don't get to lead what the topic is because you just don't want to talk about certain things, right? So for one thing, I think it's hilarious when secularists say anything about rights, as secularists can only just kind of make shit up as they go. They don't have any epistemic foundation whatsoever for what a right is, other than, oh, it's some made up bullshit that makes me feel good, right? They can't justify it at all, not even a little bit. So when they say Christians ought to do anything ever, I reject it categorically. Because for one thing, she just said she doesn't even know what a Christian is, right? There's many different denominations, but we could fire back the same way. Well, what even is an agnostic? What even is an atheist? There's all different kinds of agnostics and different kind of atheists. So which type of secular values should we go with? Which type of secular humanist rights should we value? Which type of secular humanist are you? What kind of secularism ought we follow, right? So when you talk about these things, to me, it's just as absurd sounding in the opposite direction. Should Christian follow or promote women's rights? Well, I suppose we can discuss what a right is. I would say it's an entitlement absent a duty. That's what I would consider a right to be. I've never heard a secularist give me a better definition because they don't even know what the hell rights are, even though they're always out there promoting them. women's rights specifically in the 20th and 21st century seem to be two things: the right to get naked and the right to have an abortion. They have never seen women in my lifetime ever advocate for a right that they want other than to kill their children. I've never actually seen them advocate for a single right other than a degenerate right. Oh, we have the right to make the same amount of money as men. No, you don't. That's stupid. You don't have the right to do any of that, right? So yeah, I'm happy to get into all of this and I'm looking forward to it. But honestly, no, I don't think that Christians should be promoting any version of idea of secular rights, because ultimately secularists just want to destroy Christianity. That's it. So that would be the same thing when it comes to should Christians promote women's rights. Well, which rights would you like Christians to promote? Just what, like your right to not get beat up? Like what rights are we looking at here? So yeah, I'm happy to from there kind of dive right into it.
Okay, I leave the floor open unless we need to be prompted.
Yeah, so Fairy Queen, what's a right?
I would say that I think I agree with you halfway. I agree that it's an entitlement, but I don't agree that it's absent a duty. I think that you have that entitlement because you are a citizen and because you're expected to perform a duty as a citizen.
Yeah, well, okay, so you do have a right to own a firearm, correct?
Correct.
Do you have a duty to own one?
No, you
No.
don't have
Okay,
a
well
duty.
then I don't.
No,
okay,
but-
do you,
but-
hang on, almost done. Do you have a right to vote?
Yes.
Do you have a duty to vote?
I would argue that you do have a duty to vote.
You do?
I don't think it's
You have-
compulsory, but I think that you have a duty. I think you have
What's-
an obligation as a citizen.
From who? Who does the obligation come from? You? You just think so? So we should? Because you just think so? Or
So this is
hang on,
where
let her answer, Fatty. Hang on.
I apologize. Let me take my
Yeah,
shot.
yeah. Let her answer.
You guys got it.
Oh my God.
Yes, because I think so. And
Because
you
you
can
think
laugh at me,
so.
but yes, it is. And I'll just respond to something that you
Perfect.
asked earlier.
Well, I think that we shouldn't. There we go. I'm glad that we've established it. Argument done. I think we shouldn't, and
Okay.
you think we should.
So let's return to the
Great.
prompt that we talked about initially, which was, should Christians promote women's rights? So I think that
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that we haven't established what a right is yet. We haven't established what a right is
I'll respond
yet.
to you after I'm finished. Okay. So one, you said.
Oh, did you
in
just
your
pull? Let
opening
me finish,
statement
Kamala.
that
Calm down, Kamala.
You said in your opening statement that it's just as absurd as sounding in the opposite direction. Okay. Listen, we didn't join a panel to talk about should communists promote women's rights, should Americans promote women's rights. That's not what we're here to talk about. The prompt of today is, should Christians promote women's rights? End of
Great. That's
story.
what we're talking about.
Correct. So why are you referring you're responding to me by saying it sounds just as absurd to the opposite?
Are you a
direction,
Christian?
kind of- I am not a Christian.
And are you advocating that Christians should promote X thing?
I am saying that you should.
Are you, if you're advocating that Christians should promote X thing, that I can do an internal critique on your worldview, right? Pretty
I can do an
simple.
internal critique on yours, and the
Well, and great. So that's so.
Yeah,
so you
and the
saying that
response
we're
to
getting
that
away from the
is that,
topic
like,
is
that they were-
insane.
Yeah, but you're trying to divert away from the topic. The
No,
original
I'm
topic
in the
is,
topic. I want to know what a
should
right
Christians
is.
promote women's
Great. What's a right? What's a
Anyone
right?
can have the ability to answer that. You
Yeah,
don't
great.
have to be a Christian to
Yeah,
respond
great.
to that.
Can
You
you tell
be
me
a
what a right
Muslim
is
to
now?
respond to that. You can be an
Are
American.
you going to get to the point
It
where we
doesn't
get
matter
to what a
what
right is?
religious principles that you follow. You can, if you have studied
Okay,
a
great.
religion and if you're aware of what the principles
This
are.
is all prattle. Can you get to the part
you
where
can
there's a right? What is a right?
No, I'm not answering that. I'm
No,
going
of
to
course
finish
not.
talking, and then you can answer afterwards. Be quiet.
Okay.
So,
It's really important that we get these things defined. What is a right? I'm not answering that.
No, I said I would answer it once I'm finished talking. You can't just interrupt me in the halfway in the middle of speaking, dude.
Oh,
So,
okay. I'm
as I was
sorry.
saying
You should do
originally,
that
you
next
interrupted me
time when you're done.
5,000 times, okay? So,
Don't interrupt me when I'm
sounds
talking.
just absurd in the
All
opposite
right,
direction
all
because that's not
right,
what we're here
all
to talk
right.
about. We are not here to talk about secular values. We're here to talk about Christians, and we're here to talk about like what they should or should not promote. And all I said in my opening statement was, you should promote women's rights insofar as they cohere with your values as a Christian, depending on the denomination that you adhere to.
Yeah, great.
So-
Okay, so what is a right?
I've already explained that to you at the very beginning.
Yeah,
think
but you said that there's an entailment of duty. Then I gave you something you said was
and,
a right, but you have no
and I
duty
was
to.
going to respond to that. Okay, the
Waiting
duty that you
for that
have
response.
in order to. Okay, You have the right to own a gun because you pay taxes, because you live in the United States, and because you obey the laws of the United States, and because you're a citizen of the United States. If you want to be able to continue to own a firearm or to continue to have access to your rights, you have to perform the duty of following the law of the land, of the legislation that is laid down.
Okay, so let's see if we
can
can't.
own a gun. The duty
Yeah,
is to
I'm
follow
actually
the laws
confused.
to own a gun.
Yeah, I'm confused by this entire thing. So are you saying that if you're not a net tax gain, you shouldn't be able to own a gun?
A net tax gain. I'm saying that, like, if you pay taxes and if you follow.
Yeah, but what if you get more out of the system of taxpayers than you put in?
It's not a function of how many taxes you pay.
So you just pay a tax. So if an illegal immigrant goes and pays a tax, they can have a gun. That's okay.
No. If you become,
what gives you the right to own a gun?
If you are a citizen in the United States, and if you pay taxes, and if you follow the laws, that's the duty that you have, and that's the reason why when we arrest criminals and when we put them in jail, why
you don't
we
have a duty to pay taxes
because they failed in their duty to follow.
You don't have
the
a duty to pay taxes. Many people don't pay tax. Most people, in fact, are a net tax burden. They're not paying tax. They're getting more out of the tax system they're putting in to the tax system. So they're actually a burden to the tax system. So I would reject this as some type of duty, which is a must, because it's clearly not a must. You would not say that a person could not vote or could not do any of these things because they are a drain on the tax system.
No, it's not about them being a drain on the tax system. The point is that you are contributing to, you have to pay, even if you're somebody that like uses welfare, even if you're somebody who is a drain on the tax system.
Then you're
if
not paying
you are
taxes.
paying taxes.
You're not paying taxes.
Then you go to jail. It's a crime.
No, you're not going to jail. If you get more out of the system from the tax system, listen, let me try to explain this to you, because I don't know why you're not understanding this. If you give me a nickel and I give you a dime in exchange for the nickel, did you give me 5 cents? You're saying that you gave me 5 cents, or did you make 5 cents? Tell me.
I'm saying the fact that you have to give the 5 cents in the first place entitles you because you paid your way.
Even if you're getting a dime in exchange.
Yes, even
you're still entitled. So
you're also following because you forgot the second part of that. And the second half of it is you also follow the law of the land. If you pay taxes, if you are a citizen, and if you follow the law of the land, then
so what if the law of the land is
of the right?
Oh, okay. So what if the law of the land says that you can only own a gun if you go up on a temple and cut a person's heart out? Do you think that should be a right then, that you own a gun because that's the law of the land?
I mean, I think it's a stupid law, and I think it's a stupid principle. But if that's the principle of the land, then that would be the reason.
Well, then all rights are, according to you, is the rules and regulations put forward by an individual society. That's it.
Correct. Yes, that's what it is.
Okay. Well, then if all a right is something. Okay. Well, then if all a right is something which is put forward by some individual society, then if an individual society says anything is a right, then it is, correct? And anything is a duty, then it is?
I mean, societies can make that determination for themselves if they want to.
Well, I don't understand. How else is this done by your definition here of what a right is?
I'm just saying, like, the reason.
Like, what are your rights on a desert island, for instance? Do you have a right on a desert island to do anything? What's your right? Do you have a right to eat coconuts on a desert island?
I'll return to like the very beginning. This is part of the reason why I wanted to ask if we're talking about legal rights or if we're talking about natural rights.
Both.
I'm talking. Okay, well, we have to talk about them separately because they're not.
Yeah, we are talking about them separately. So I want to know what a right is. You said a right is this just the laws of the land.
Yeah, I'm talking about legal rights.
So that means they're not rights. That means they're not rights because people could just take them away if they change the law of the land. That's why it makes no sense. And so I'm asking you now that we've established that nobody has any rights except whatever somebody says your rights are.
Well, hang on.
What are your rights on a desert island? What are your rights then?
You don't have any legal rights on a desert island because you're not a part of a country.
Okay, what are your natural rights on a desert island?
I mean, presumably, like, we have rights in order to say what you are entitled to from other people. So I'm not sure what your natural rights.
So you don't have any rights on a desert island?
If you're not around other people, like, because
Fatty and Torsha, if you do want to chime in or go grab a beer,
they're good. Keep going.
So here's your. I'm just going to repeat this to you. Here's your definition of rights. You have a right to do what you're told. That's your definition of. You have a right to do what you're told by your government. You have a right to do what you're told by the collective. That's what you have a right to do. That's what you think rights are. Not kidding. That's what your position reduces to. You have a right to do what you're told.
You have the right to do what you're told, and you will
Mhm.
receive benefits, and you will only receive the entitlements and benefits if you do as you're told. That's what it is to be in a country. That's what it is to
Mhm.
have a set of legal and moral principles that outline
So
what
there
the
is
law demands
no
to be.
great. So then there is no deeper set of rights. So if we agree there's no deeper sets of rights from your value structure,
Of my
then
value structure.
then
We're not
whatever.
talking about my value structure. We're talking about your value
Yeah,
structure,
but
which is
how can
why
you?
I returned
Yeah,
back
how
to
can
the
you
state.
criticize my value structure if your value structure is anything a collective of Christian tells you to do is fine?
Okay, well, first of all, I didn't come in here necessarily to critique your value structure. All I said at the very beginning of this
Mhm.
of my opening statement was Christians should promote women's rights insofar as they cohere with their principles as Christians, depending on the denomination that you're in. So what that would mean is,
Well, I still
if
don't even know what a right is. It would just be whatever the determination of whoever says they're a Christian church as a collective says the right is, and then imposes it on people with force, right? That's it.
do you think that do you think that the government has the right to tax people?
I don't know because I'm still not sure what we're talking about when it comes to rights. I'm not actually clear on what a right is unless you I need you to just clarify this, I guess. And then maybe we can move forward. Is all a right is to you just whatever the collective can enforce?
A right is an entitlement that you receive as a response of you fulfilling your duty as a citizen in the society. That's what
And
a
it,
right is.
well, okay, but if nobody enforces any of these duties or rights or things like this, they don't exist, right? So they have to be imposed on people.
They do have to be imposed upon people, and
Okay.
they're okay, but
So then
like
it's whatever we can impose upon you is what you have a right or not a right to do, right?
I mean, if we're talking simply about legal rights, like simply merely
Well, I don't. You just said that there is no other right besides the legal right.
from my perspective, like I don't believe necessarily in natural rights because I'm not a Christian. I'm not a religious person.
I don't
But
believe in natural rights either, and I am a Christian. That's
okay.
a Catholic. That's a Catholic thing, by the way. But anyway, this aside, if all we're saying here is that all a right is whatever guys with guns tell you a right is, then I actually don't dispute that claim. I think that that's actually consistent for a secularist to say that there's no such thing as rights. All that there really is a collective of people with guns who utilize force to get you to do what they want and call it all sorts of different things, be it duty or be it rights or be it whatever. What else could it be? It seems like it's just a force doctrine thing, right?
Yeah,
I mean
yeah,
that.
but
I mean, you can frame it that way. Like that is one way to frame it. But
Well,
another
what
way to
else
frame
is it?
the way that Thomas Hobbes framed it, and the way that he framed it was that you living as an isolated person, like with no connections to society, okay? At any moment, somebody can come into your house and can shoot and kill you and can take all of your stuff. So
Mhm.
what is the response is that you have to go and you have to get a bigger gun so that you can shoot and kill. And the problem with this is that it causes constant warfare between people. It causes increased rates of violence, increased rates of problems throughout society. So what do? We
That
secede
we still do
our
that.
we well we can't we what it happens, right? But in
No,
order to
that is what it is right now.
no, but what we do to avoid that is we entrust in the state.
We don't
So
avoid
that
it.
when somebody breaks in your house, you can pick up the phone
No,
and you can
it's
call the
just now
police
the
to come
state.
and to break in and to save you.
Nope, it's just that the state has the bigger gun and can just still do the same thing. It still kicks in your door and can still do that, and you still would
Yeah,
have
but
to
the
go get a
point
bigger
is that
gun to
the
defend
reason,
yourself.
but the point is that is why we have the apparatus of the state. The reason why we have the apparatus of the state is so that when an individual man comes into your individual home with a gun,
Mhm.
you don't have to worry about getting a bigger gun.
Yeah, because the state
Yes,
yeah,
exactly,
because the
right?
state intercedes upon you, right? Or for you.
Yes,
So instead of you going and getting your friends, you call the state instead.
yes, correct.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, got it. So then the state is the grantor of all rights.
I don't understand.
Hang on. I just want to answer that question. Then the state is the grantor to all rights.
It is the grantor to all legal rights.
Okay, are there any other rights besides legal rights?
From my perspective, no, but different people have
Okay,
different
great.
opinions.
Well, then I don't know what we're even arguing about then. If
All right,
if I don't even know what we're arguing about then, if ultimately the entire worldview just reduces to whatever the state says goes because they're the guys with guns and legal rights are the only things there are, there's no external rights to that, then whether or not Christians believe that there are, like, who cares ultimately? Why should they do anything from your perspective? Why should they do anything?
I think that I think
Hold on, let Fatty chime in. He's been trying to chime in.
I just find it funny. Like, it's always what are rights and rights are not real and all that. But when Wes Johnson was threatening you on the Fresh and Fit podcast, you kind of invoked your Second Amendment right. You said, do you really threaten men that use arms on or have arms on Florida, meaning that you kind of are very aware of your rights? You know that if that man attack you, you can stand your ground and literally put 7 holes on him and nothing will happen to you, right? So this conversation a lot of times is kind of like devolves into a meta conversation because, Andrew, you and your people advocate for men to take care of their children. There's nothing that actually makes me take care of my children at all. There's nothing that makes me have to take care of my children, but you still push forward. You still tell men to do what's right by their family, by their
not a right, though.
You don't?
No, I said it's not a right. That's a duty.
Yes, but you still do it, and that's the point. That's the point.
Yeah, what I don't understand the point, actually.
The prompt is, blessed be, should Christians promote woman rights? You are telling me that rights are not real. You know what not real?
Yes, that's right.
Money. And right now you probably have $500 in your side with internet money that actually doesn't exist. We just decide that it exists. Why can't we accept some artificial things that human created that are socially contract, like religion, God, money? A white sheet of paper is the same thing as a green sheet of paper. Why is that?
Well, let me answer the question here.
Please. Let me finish because
I'm going to Gish Gallop. I'd like to answer to the point.
But the point is that you went for 20 minutes, so I think I should get.
Oh no, we had an argument that you weren't included. Oh my God. Yes. Oh no, that's terrible.
Oh no. Oh my God. Yes. So now that you cried, I don't understand.
Sounds like you're crying. I'm just trying to answer your question.
Yes.
All right, boys.
I truly don't understand why we have to say, is money real? Is right real? Is society real? Everything is a social construct. By the laws of the land, natural laws, the survivors of the fittest, there's always going to be somebody bigger than you that can take your shit. But I guarantee you, The Rock will get fucked up by a judge that can touch them, can do nothing to him, but just because he has power, he can enforce something to The Rock. So yes, rights are real, because if they weren't, Wes Johnson will fuck you up, and I'm glad he didn't, because you had your second amendment right to defend yourself. So go ahead, you got this.
Okay, so yeah, when you say we're having a meta conversation, we're not having a meta conversation. It would be a conversation about the conversation. We're just having the conversation. So that's one. Then two, we're talking about metaphysics, which is applied here. And there's nothing wrong with talking about metaphysics because they do apply when you're talking about something which is metaphysical, like rights. So when we dive into rights, you say, well, wait, money's not real, right, Andrew? No, money is not real. It is a social construction. I'll just grant it off the bat that the only thing that gives money value is the fact that we claim that it has value, and that's it. It has no intrinsic value. It's just a piece of paper. You could take monopoly money. You could replace all money with it. As long as people had faith in the same value of currency that monopoly money now represented, it would still be just as valuable as dollars.
So it's real.
So no, it's not real. It's a construction of the mind.
How is that not real? The thing that you actually are mistaken is the.
Well, then tell me, what does real mean?
I don't know.
Real means exist in material reality.
I am not as smart as you, but I would think that is based on reality, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say that you use what would be called like a correspondence theory for truth, right? Correspondence theory being that which corresponds with reality is what is true and what is real, right?
I will go with that because I'm not that smart.
Yeah, so it's probably like something like this. So here's the thing. It corresponds with reality that people have faith in a value exchange, whatever it is, Bitcoin, which is not money, right? But is money. If we decide it's money, we did decide it's money, so therefore it's money. That's what corresponds with reality. What doesn't hang on. What doesn't correspond with reality is you making the claim, oh, money is real. It's not. The pieces of paper are real. They exist in objective reality. But the reason you have to make these distinctions is because otherwise guys like you could say men could be women, right? Because you can't make the distinguishment between which parts are which parts and this type of thing when you apply it to objective reality. So we have to unfortunately take what is a social construction and separate it from what is material reality. Not everything is a social construction. That's absurd. There are things which exist in material reality, and there's things which do not.
But you can prove that a woman is a woman and a man is a man. There's science that actually we can look at the chromosomes.
Good. Prove that a dollar has any value. Prove that a dollar has material value.
Gentlemen.
Prove that a dollar has material value outside the mind.
So, sir, there's natural reality and there's artificial reality. Artificial means that humans created that. A diamond is not worth nothing, but if we give a value of a diamond, that becomes artificial reality because we actually put a value on that. It's
Well,
real.
you're just saying exactly what I just said. That's incredible. Well, yay for you.
Sir,
You just said exactly what I just said.
Okay, bring it back around, Fatty. Bring it back around.
Exactly the point in the conversation that we have. A man dressed in blue with a gun and a badge technically is just a man, but we artificially gave him power so he can be a cop the same way you give to a military, the same way you give it to a judge, the same way we give it to a president. So, and those men can actually enact power. So by your own statement that you only have power if you can enact power and enforce power, something that we created artificially like a cop or a judge actually wield real power because they can give punishment to the people that don't follow the law. So that's real.
Great.
Even if it's artificial.
So I will. So let's again. We'll untangle two things here, right? So I will absolutely concede that the effect of power on material reality is real. You can see the effect for yourself in material reality. People die, or they live, or we act as though there's a right, and so we follow the right, or we get in a movie theater line. Certainly the effect of whatever the laws and regulations of the land are 100% true, because you can see them with your own eyes, right? Nobody would ever dispute that. What we're disputing here is if you should support this nebulous idea of rights, if Christians should support this nebulous idea of rights. Yes. The reason that I'm making this distinguishment is because last I checked, Christians are not there to support the enforcement of things which kill people, for instance, right? We're not supposed to do that. So if that is the case, the reason we would need to separate out what is a legal right or what is just being reduced to what is force, which is what both of you reduced it to. We have force and then we have not force. Then I don't understand exactly why Christians should support your version of force. Do you understand now why it's so important that we made these distinctions? Why it's so important that we separated out what is true, what is not true, what you believe actual rights are, which is force, and you think Christians should be utilizing force, right? If you think that Christians should support the rights that they believe in, then you're actually saying that Christians have a right to use force.
No, I'm just seeing.
No. Okay.
No, Andrew, one second. Mm-hmm. I am not as smart as you. You say a lot of things. I never thought about half of it, so I'm not even going to pretend that I thought about it, right? But I just want logical consistency, right? Mm-hmm. You say that the enforcement, it was actually make rights. If I came to you when I suggest you, and I think my microphone is a little bit better. I don't know. I was using my webcam mic. I'm sorry. So if I came to you and I said 20-year-olds should have way more rights than 60-year-olds because 16-year-olds can enforce their rights since they're old as fuck and they can barely walk, would you agree with me that the 20-year-old that is on the prime of his life can fuck up any 55-year-old and up should have more rights than a 60-year-old?
It doesn't mean. Well, actually, that
would you agree with me?
Well, no, that wouldn't actually track logically from the worldview that you are espousing, because all you're talking about is who monopolizes and controls force. That's it. So you would agree with me, for instance, that 60-year-olds control and monopolize far more force than 20-year-olds. They're the ones who send the 20-year-olds off to use the force on their behalf, Fatty.
No, I'm talking about your worldview, not mine. You said, and once again, women can enforce their rights.
Then I'll just do it for my worldview. Then I'll do it for my worldview. You don't want me to do it for my worldview? Okay.
No, absolutely. Let's talk about it, right?
I was just trying
to.
Your
worldview. You say men enforce women's rights. Women can enforce women's rights. So therefore, they don't have rights. Rights are not real because they can be taken away, all of that. So let's go to Jeff Bezos. Let's go to Dorky Elon Musk's. Let's go to Aaron, like the Buffett guy is a perfect example. An 80-year-old with billions of dollars. Should the 20-year-old that didn't accomplish nothing in life, didn't build nothing in life, doesn't have a wife, a house, kids, work at McDonald's, should he have more rights than Aaron Buffett? Then literally is a billionaire and he can't enforce his rights because he's weak as fuck. Should we actually give that?
So let's dive into it. So if we've established that all rights is force, then making the should claim, should 20-year-olds, if they can apply the significant amount of use of force in order to enforce their will, do it, then you'd have to concede that yes, they should, or could, at the very least, that they could. The descriptor here where you're messing it all up is it's not that that people who are weak people cannot use a monopoly on force or use enforcement, because they most certainly can. It's that men are the only ones who can ever collectively change their conditions, therefore change their rights, and women collectively cannot, absent the use of force of men. That's what the argument is. It'll always hang on, Fatty, let me finish. It'll always require men to enforce the rights of women. Women will never be able to enforce their rights themselves. And because since that is the case, Warren Buffett and all these different people that you see who are around, if men, a small dynamic of men collectively decided that there wasn't going to be a Warren Buffett anymore, then there fucking wouldn't be a Warren Buffett anymore. However, if a small collective of women decided it, nothing would happen. That's the distinction.
That's actually fair, but why stop at women? Why not say kids shouldn't have any rights?
They don't.
They're weak. They're weak.
They don't have rights. They don't have any rights.
Okay, let's go even further. What about weak men? Should weak men have rights?
Weak men can collectivize together and therefore use force.
That's
That's true. That's true. I'm sorry. So like, let's say you got it.
I'll concede to you. No, I concede to you. No, Andrew.
Okay.
Andrew, I concede to you. You don't have to. You don't have to.
Let me just explain. Let me just explain, and then I'll let you talk. I haven't been cutting you off, right? It's now it's good. We've gotten to an actual conversation now, which is good. Let's say you got a 6'4" dude, right, and he's picking on some 5'5" guys. Okay, 3 of them. Okay, now he's in trouble, right? So any one of those men, he might be able to dominate, but all 3 of them together, now they collectively can do something about this, right?
Yes.
Now let's change those 3 guys out with 5'5" women. He's still fine, right? He's still fine. It's not going to be much of a problem. Now, if you could say you could collectivize enough women, I suppose, against a single individual in that situation where they could use force to overpower him. These are outliers which happen. But when it comes to actual enforcement, state enforcement of rights, you're always going to have to defer to men, and even weak men can collectivize in order to make their will obeyed.
So that's totally fair, and I agree with you, right? But my problem is, why don't you escalate things? On my country, like in Europe, Portugal, there's a saying that says, "Men rule the world and women rule men." Right? We can see it in fiction. Game of Thrones.
Simp country, or
King
what?
Joffrey. No, I'm not a simp at all, sir. Let's not go there, right?
No, I said simp country.
Oh, absolutely. Fuck bitches, get money. That's the motto in Portugal. But even though, right, let's actually look at what is happening, right? Even in fiction, you actually see this. King Joffrey was not the king. His mother was the king. Technically, is war by proxy. You are not the power that you actually have. You have the power and the influence that you can wield. So if you say that weak men can get together and actually enforce said things, why don't we use the same logic by woman? A powerful woman that has such a network and such vast influence other men, that instead of her wielding her own power, she is more powerful than every person in the room, because she actually uses those men to wield said power. Why stop there?
Actually, you're making my point for me. So if we're talking about force doctrine, the idea here is that men can always apply sufficient force to change their conditions and women cannot. If you say, well, wait, but what about the fact that women can wield the power of men to enforce their rights? That's my whole fucking point. My whole fucking point is that women can't enforce the rights on their own without men, Fatty. That's my whole point, Fatty. That they can't do it, Fatty, without appealing to men, which is what you just said, Fatty.
Yes, but you are aware of wars by proxy, where literally countries either finance terrorist groups, they finance other countries. That's what happened in Ukraine. It's not Ukraine versus Russia. Is Russia versus United States. Technically, it's a war by proxy, where all these countries from NATO are sending a tremendous amount of money to make sure that they have a fighting chance when they shouldn't.
What's your point, bro?
That's extremely power. We see in the Middle East what happened with Palestine and Israel. They are not the strongest country in the world, just have a tremendous amount of support in the world, meaning USA. So if you can lend your power, if you can actually get on the end of a politician, be a lobbying, and now he's doing your bidding, you can tell, even though BlackRock might not be the most powerful government institution, group, collective in the world, they actually are, because they have the funds to literally corrupt every country in the planet so they can get their way. Why can a company
so
do
what?
that that is oblivious?
I don't understand your point. You're just making my point for me, bro.
He's going to have a point.
You're just circling back to my point, though.
No, he's not.
I'm going to show you as soon as you're done. You just are circling right back to my point again.
So your point is always men are men, men are men, men are men, men have power, woman weak, woman weak, woman weak. My question to you is, why stop at men?
I don't.
Because there's a
it's
a very small amount of men that actually wield the power that you talk about. Wouldn't that make the other men actually superfluous? I don't know if that's the word. Because you say
like lesser than, like lesser than.
Yes, because what you say is, if men got together, fuck that shit. That's not reality. Men will never get together.
They do it all the time. They do it all the time.
Matter of
Very
fact, for
Queen next, and then I would like to
so
hear
I'd like to
Portia.
respond to some of this.
Let me just finish this, and you guys can have it.
Go
for
ahead.
every man that has your point of view, there are going to be two men that are going to stand up and say, I'm going to fight for the rights of my wife, of my daughter, of my sister. So even your statement is a fallacy. Men are not going to get together to suppress women. Men are actually going to stand and bear arms to fight other men for their sisters and their wives.
Like in Afghanistan?
The Afghanistan is a very particular.
No!
So
men collectively in Afghanistan said, "You ain't got no rights." No, they. What are women going to do about it, Fatty? Tell me.
They are not going to do
nothing. Complain to men. They're going to complain to other men in other countries and demand other men in other countries come in and fucking live with them, Fatty.
Yes,
admit it. Just admit it.
So yes, but that's the point. You actually prove my point. You are using the Taliban to say that men can go and take any right that women think they have, when bigger when bigger dogs can literally go to Afghanistan.
All women can do is appeal to men to liberate them from the men. That's it, because they can't enforce their rights, Fatty. For the 300th time, they can't enforce their own rights, Fatty. They can't do it.
Okay, I'd like
I
would like to hear from. Hold on, Portia. I would like to hear from you, and then we'll shift it back over to Fairy Queen, because Portia hasn't spoken yet.
So I agree that men have enforcement, and I understand that. But then why is the church woke today? If that's the case,
well, there's only one the church. Now you can argue that the one church, and Catholics argue it all the time, is the Catholic Church. I would argue it's the Orthodox Church, right? But that is the only structure of the church. There is no the church from a Protestant perspective, because each Protestant considers themselves the church.
So just not your church.
Yeah, so just so you know, Catholics and Orthodox, it's a patriarchal religion. It's literally called a patristic faith for a reason. Women are not allowed to be deaconesses. They're not allowed to be priests. They're not allowed to hold positions of authority within the church. They're not allowed to be clergy. They're not allowed to do any of these things. So when you make these kind of bold claims of, well, why is the church woke? Well, the church isn't fucking woke. The truth of the matter is that they're the only ones who resist LGBTQ propaganda, feminism, the non-patriarchal viewpoints in the world. That's always been resisted by the church. Protestants fucked this up with Martin Luther, who was a worthless nun-humping man whore. Okay, and he messed up modern day Christianity for the West with Protestantism. But the church is a patristic faith. It's patristic, not there for women. Not for women's empowerment. In other words, it's there for women to be humble. The Bible teaches that women are liberated through childbirth. That is their true liberation. That is their true power. And literally it talks about the salvation through childbirth, because now you have a responsibility greater than yourself, an actual duty. It's not about my rights. It's not about my rights. It's not about what I get. It's not about my equality. It's about submission to Jesus Christ. That's what it's about, is submission to Jesus Christ. And the authority and the heads of inside of a marriage, for instance, the representation of what Jesus Christ is the husband. And so your job is to submit and obey. Your job is not to talk about how you want more egalitarianism and how you want more shit for yourself. That is not a Christian viewpoint. So when people say Christians ought to support this X political agenda, it's a perversion right from the outset. And then when we're able to reduce it, Torsia, we find out that the very people who are telling us that we ought to support women's rights, when you reduce what they think a right is, they just think it's force. If that is the case, then what they're actually asking Christians to do is use force. That's the only way it logically tracks.
And Fairy Queen to you. Thank you for your patience.
So, yeah, no worries. I have a series of questions. So one, okay, do you think that the disabled have rights?
Well, again, I don't think we've established what a right is here.
I think that we have. I think I've said that I believe that like rights are purely
well, then no,
rights.
then no. Disabled people have no rights. Then, from your viewpoint, they don't. I think that Christians have a duty not to do horrible things to anybody, including disabled people. So, from my worldview, you would have a duty not to do horrible things to people, including disabled people. From your worldview, no, disabled people have no rights except what the state says. In fact, if the state goes ahead like Germany did and says, all of this X people over here are going to die. And they actually enforced this program. It was called I think the T program, where they went and they took all of the mental retarded people in the nation and killed them all. That's what they did. Right. That was a legitimate program that they had. Under your purview, that should be absolutely fine because that was the state. And the state was using enforcement, and that's the laws of the land. You shouldn't even have an objection to it. Only Christians would have an objection to it because we have a higher duty in how we have to treat people.
Well, obviously, I do have an objection to it, and my objection and the way that I express my objection to it is by choosing not to live in a country like that. If tomorrow I found out that my state, like
you've never had the option,
but if I did have the option, I would make that choice.
You don't know that.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, I mean, you could just.
You don't know that I wouldn't make
that's
that.
That's just an ad hoc. It's just an ad hoc justification for you to say, "Well, I would never if I was there." It's like we don't fucking know what you would do if you were there. We don't know.
You don't know what I would do if I wasn't there either. You can't.
No, that's why I wouldn't. But
the answer is, and I keep saying, I mean, this is exactly what Martin Luther King said when he made his final speech at an on the mountaintop. He said, "If I lived in China or Russia or any other totalitarian state, I would expect to have these illegal injunctions." But somewhere I read about the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read about the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read about the right to protest for your rights. And that didn't come from the Bible. That came from the Constitution. And that was because when Martin Luther King made that argument in the 60s, is that he relied upon both a religious argument and a secular argument. And he combined the both
that
of
I have
them
to blow your silly argument out real quick. But when you say that he learned about that from the Constitution, not from God, the entire axiom, pinnacle of the Constitution, is we hold these truths to be self-evident, right? This is our axiom, that all men are created and endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Who would this creator be if it wasn't God, ma'am?
Well, I mean, to be very frank with you, at the time, the founders, many of them were believers. They were deists, though. They weren't Christians in the same sense.
So they believed in God?
They believed in a God, but in a vague version of the God.
So then Martin Luther actually got the extension of all of these ideas from Christianity and God. And even deists, if you say that they're deists, deists themselves, yes. Well, they weren't deists. Some were deists.
Some were
that
deists,
is true.
Yes.
Like Jefferson wrote the Jeffersonian Bible, things like this. But the vast overwhelming majority of the founding fathers were Christians. There was thousands upon thousands of contributors to the Constitution of the United States. They were all Christians. Every single state had its own church. And there was no separation even of church and state. Every single state had its own church.
Precisely the reason why it was so important when George Washington made sure to say in the Treaty of Tripoli that this nation is in no sense founded.
You mean Thomas Jefferson?
I think it was George Washington.
No, it wasn't George Washington in the Treaty of Tripoli. That was first of all, that was Jefferson, and second of all, no, that's an incorrect interpretation of what Jefferson was saying there. I believe it was Jefferson, not Washington.
I'm pretty sure it was Washington.
Pull it up and correct me. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I could be wrong. I accept that I'm wrong, but I don't think that I am in this case. I think that
the thing is,
it was Jefferson. Yeah, it was Jefferson. I'm pretty sure it was Jefferson.
Aren't those books social constructs? Isn't the Constitution a social construct? Isn't the Bible a social construct? Something that a man decided or multiple men decided to write Why are these things valuable and right? But every time you point something that was made by men that you don't like, it can be enforced. Why can't we look at the guys that wrote the Bible? It's a social construct, but God told us it's fine. Oh, it's the Constitution. It was made by people that believe in God. It's fine. All of these are social constructs. Why do we enforce some and we don't enforce the other ones? It's a valid question. Why?
Let me make sure I got the question right. Do you mind if I steel man it, and then you can tell me if I'm right? Like, why do we enforce some things but not other things? Is that what you're asking me?
Probably that, but more closer. Why do you guys have conversations about, oh, these people that wrote the Constitution believed in God. These people that wrote the Bible believed in God. These are social constructs. It's man-made. It's man-made. Man actually wrote those. Why do we consider those valid? But when it comes to these rights that other people wrote on the book and said, this is law, let's pass it, these are rights, human rights, why do we have to disregard them? Like, why one is more powerful than the other one?
So to steel man the position, if it's true that God is just a social construction, or the Bible's a social construction because man wrote it instead of like a divine being coming down and writing it himself, something like this, why is it that we should adhere to those rather than other social constructions?
Yes, let's go with that.
Okay, so just so you understand, these are philosophical questions, and one of the philosophical branches is theology. And what we're talking about is a great fallacy inside of philosophy itself, which is what is axiomatic. Everything is axiomatic. So anything other than the theological branch is axiomatic, which can reconcile this idea of falsified starting points. We start at some arbitrary place rather than starting at the beginning, usually based around intuition or something like this. That's why the entirety of your worldview, Fatty and Fairy Queen, and all secularists will always reduce to the same exact thing, which is force, because there's no other thing to reduce it to. It's just me have gun, me have intuition, me want you do thing, you do thing. That's it. That's the entirety of your worldview reduced. It's always going to be the entirety of your worldview reduced. It'll never be anything but that. That's why.
Why is your worldview different? Why is it different to be a Christian person? Why is it the case?
Because we have an unerring, unchanging standard from which to apply. And even if it weren't true, even if it was just axiomatic, the standard could not be changed even with force. And so since that is the case, and we have an unchanging standard, and your standard is always subject to change because you don't believe that there can even be an unchanging standard, you will always build poorer civilizations. You will always have worse people in your civilizations. And you will always end up with the paradoxical idea that people have inalienable rights, but you'll never be able to justify why. That's why.